gentlemen.
Yeah.
Ajay, I think we are good.
Yes, you can go ahead, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to especially welcome all of you to this event runs up the year's activity, the Cable Foundation Campus Journalism Project that we tagged Campus Civic Media Campaign, CCMC. The project has largely been funded by the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, or SIWA. The core goal of our campus initiative is to use the vehicle of journalism to deepen democratic participation and, of course, expand civic engagement among youths in tertiary institutions. This is in the push for good governance. And over the past 12 months, CNJF, that's the Cable Newspaper Journalism Foundation. By the way, the Cable Newspaper Journalism Foundation is a sister organization to the cable newspaper that we all know. The foundation is a not-for-profit organization that uses the vehicle of journalism to advance transparency and accountability in government. It also seeks to build an active citizenry to promote democracy and development. The foundation is a subscriber to Solutions Journalism, a school that believes in rigorous reporting of positive response to problems and challenges. So the campus project is actually an extension of one of the things we do at the foundation. So in the past 12 months, in partnership with the Cable newspaper, we have trained up to 41 campus journalists across 14 universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education in the southwest and north central regions of the country. These were paired with mentors who helped them gain hands-on experience and produce investigative reports. We have also engaged 8 fresh graduates as interns at our Lagos, Abuja, and Ibadan newsrooms. The core purpose of this webinar is to diffuse the knowledge gained by the campus journalists and improve it through interactive discussions with the larger youth society. Once again, I want to welcome you all, and I would like to do a brief introduction as we proceed. I'd like to welcome the Executive Director of the Cable Newspaper Journalism Foundation, Mr. Simon Kolaole. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
I'd also like to welcome Program Officer at the Cable Foundation, Mrs. Abiose Adelaja. You're welcome, ma. Do we still have Ms. Abiose on board?
Just unmute and answer.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you.
Yes. We also like to welcome Mr. Femi Atoyebi, who is Head of Investigation for the Campus Project. And we also like to specially welcome our special guest. We have Dr. Tunde Akoni. Dr. Tunde Akoni is an associate professor of journalism at the School of Communication at Lagos State University. Do we have Dr. Tunde?
Yeah, good morning, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Say hi to the entire house.
Good to have you, sir. We also like to especially welcome Mrs. Stella Dean Jacob. Ms. Jacob is Director of News at Television Continental, TVC. Do we have her on board? All right. Before I call on Mr. Femi Atoyebi to give us 2-minute testimonials, today we'll be having 2 speakers, Dr. Tunde Akoni, who will be taking us through a topic that from investigations to action, how investigative journalism can produce change. And later on, we'll have Ms. Dean Jacob take us through youth participation in democratic process, the role of campus journalists. And most importantly, we like to also welcome our participants, some of our colleagues from the newsroom, and then colleagues too from the campus. You are welcome. Let's welcome Mr. Femi Atoyebi, the Head of Investigation for the CCMC project, to please brief us on the testimonials so far on the project. Mr. Atoyebi.
Mr. Heavy, please unmute yourself.
Mr. Atoyebi, do we still have you on board? I think. Okay.
He needs to unmute himself.
Okay, while we wait for him to sort the technicality, I think we should move on to the next on the list here. We'd like to have remarks by the Executive Director of the Cable Newspaper Journalism Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, guests and friends, let's welcome Mr. Simon Kolawole.
Thank you very much. I want to especially appreciate every single one of us who has decided to be part of this program. The Cable, as Mr. Ulabi already told us, the Cable Newspaper Journalism Foundation, a sister organization to the Cable Online newspaper, is a not-for-profit organization that wants to use the tools, or that uses the tool of journalism, fights the cause of accountability and transparency, as well as encourage public participation, what we call participatory democracy. We got support from OSIWA program, which is focused mainly on campus journalism, how to get them to use the tool of journalism to investigate on their campuses across the country, to also encourage youth participation in democracy. Anyone who is familiar with what is happening in Nigeria knows that the demographics of the youth is something that, depending on the figures we are using, depending on the standards we are using, because the definition of youth varies from one country to the other. But I think the current definition allow people who are in their 20s to be called youth. In the past year, it was up to 39 years. Now, when you look at the massive population of Nigeria, the youth are in the majority. Unlike some other countries where they have the elderly as the majority. So if we say we want Nigeria to change, if we say we want Nigeria to become an accountable society, an accountable democracy, we have to focus a lot on the youth. Not only are they leaders of tomorrow, they are also leaders of today. And the leadership is not just about being in an appointed or it is the area of influence. So we start to focus not just higher institutions, change. Nigeria is going to leadership process. The leadership process is something we have to focus attention on, so that we just don't keep lamenting year in year out that the election is rigged. Oh, the right people are not coming forward. Oh, the people are not asking the right questions from those they have elected into office. So by focusing on journalism at the campus level, we are trying to use as a vehicle through which we can get the youth, the ones who are still in school, to participate in issues of accountability, transparency, democracy. And that is exactly what we have been doing in the last 1 year. This is not the first. We held a training in Abuja as part of the program, selected campus journalists from across the country. And also, many of them have done investigative stuff, very encouraging. Of course, we also have some very not so positive outcomes, which tend to support some of the prejudice against youth. But we have come to realize that it doesn't take 200 million people to make Nigeria a better place. Even one person who is properly, who's schooled on their neck, can make a whole lot of difference. So this is like the final of our training symposium. Colloquium or webinar, whatever we choose to do, everything is now going online. We are very grateful that we have in our midst two all the issues that analyze whatever we have been taught and ask questions.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I hear you.
Good morning. Yeah. Am I okay now?
Yes, you are fine now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Femi Atoyebi, the head of investigation CCMC project. I want to give you an overview of what we have done in the past 1 year stories that have been written, actions that have been done, and the cost of the project. As the CEO pointed out, the general objective of CCMC initiative, which is to promote social action and political participation among undergraduates in the tertiary institutions in Nigeria, and to also deepen democracy in Nigeria through support for campus journalism. The project also focuses on building the capacity of campus journalism through workshops on investigative reporting, data journalism, and using journalism as a tool for social change. Part of the mandate is also to hold government accountable for the huge amount of money spent on COVID-19. In the course of the year, a number of pitches were developed, which led to the publication of stories that showed how money spent to contain the spread of the virus were wasted or not utilized because of poor monitoring and enforcement of the laws, even in government offices and establishments. One of such stories published in TheCable on September 11, 2020, showed how safety equipment procured by governments in states across the country to fight the spread of the virus were banned. They laid in rooms as we speak, in places where they were installed as Nigeria slid into new wave of coronavirus infection. Our training. What we encountered a few challenges at the beginning because of the closure of all schools in Nigeria in the wake of COVID-19 spread. There was a huge challenge in making contact with students and assembling them for the first edition of our workshop and training. However, the team was able to bring together 20 students from 5 tertiary institutions in the southern part of Nigeria, southwestern part of Nigeria. In December 2020, the students were assembled in Lagos for the 2-day training, which had the theme, news writing and investigative journalism, training from campus to field. We had people who spoke on that day. One of them is Olukorede Yusau. He spoke on the first day. He delivered a paper on elements of systematic, in-depth research and reporting investigative journalism. He also delivered another paper on news writing in investigative journalism. Mr. Isao, just to take a brief of what he said, Mr. Isao told the students, he was able to point out to the students the difference between routine and investigative journalism, which is what the program is all about. He also pointed out the importance of simplicity in writing so that even a layman can understand what the investigation is all about. Using KISS, that's KISS, keep it simple and short rule. Yisao taught the students how to remove redundant words from a story. On the same day, Juliana Francis, another multiple award-winning journalist and crime editor of New Telegraph newspaper, delivered a paper on ethical and legal issues in investigative reporting. In her lecture, she pointed out legal issues in investigative reporting, defamation, and libel, and how all this can be avoided. Olukayode Thomas, an investigative journalist, took to the floor on the second day, speaking on the techniques of investigative journalism and mechanism of corruption and how to uncover them. Thomas pointed out to the students the challenges of investigative journalism and how to surmount them using data tools. In March 2021, the second training was held in Abuja for another set of 20 students drawn from 7 tertiary institutions in Nigeria, in the North Central. Let me quickly talk about the impact of the stories that we have done over the year. On December 16, 2020, we published a story on how travelers can get fake COVID-19 test results from government officials with just 25,000 naira. It was an investigative story where Chinedu Asadu, who has left the organization, and Taiwo Adibolu passed as potential travelers at the Muritala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos and Idamdi Azikiwe Airport in Abuja. The story generated strong reaction from government, leading to the setting up of a 9-man panel of inquiry, with TheCable invited to make appearance on January 11, 2021. Our undercover reports, written by some of our mentees, that is the students we trained, on how government officials extorted Nigerians for up to 8,000 naira for registration, also generated response from government. A scrutiny of our stories. Let me tell this gathering that the idea, all the story ideas submitted were scrutinized by officers on the project before grants were given for fieldwork to commence. Only those that were found worthy of publication were accepted. I also want to talk about the challenges we faced. As you can see, it was not all rosy at the beginning. Mentors did a lot of work to keep the students focused on the project, because the students also have the duty to focus on the academic studies. Most of the students have never investigated stories as undercover, so mentors kept in touch with them while on the field to protect them by offering them identity concealment skills. We are still working with those who have not submitted pitches to ensure success of the project. There are more stories written by the mentees that will soon be published, while sealed by the mentees. In all, a total of 47 students from 13 tertiary institutions were involved in the project, and already some of them have begun writing for TheCable and have shown interest in practicing journalism. I will call on 3 of our mentees to share their experience with us now. Hello.
So the first person on the list will be Adetola
Adetola Adegoke.
Okay.
Adetola Adegoke participated in the NIN story. Can we have Adetola Adegoke to share experience with us?
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Good day, everyone. My name is Adegoke. Before I
I think we are having issue with Mr. Tweby. Can we have the next
Yeah. Can we have
journalist?
Can we have on Abiola Ogunleye? Abiola Ogunleye.
If Abiola is not on board.
Oh.
Okay, so John Stone is here.
Okay, we have John Stone.
John Stone. Go ahead, John Stone.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Stone Pilaka, one of the campus journalists that participated in the training in March in Abuja. Now, when I received the acceptance mail for the training, I was actually overwhelmed. It was going to be my first on-site opportunity to be trained as a campus journalist. And growing up, it has been my desire to practice professionally as a journalist. And here was an opportunity for a fully funded opportunity for me to learn. So I was actually overwhelmed. The experience at the training in Abuja was really amazing. The sessions were very insightful. And the conversations with my colleagues from other schools also opened me a lot to some possibilities I thought that I could not access as a student. Relating with them and the facilitators and our program managers showed me that there is actually a possibility that even as a student on campus, I can be able to ensure accountability in government and foster development in our society. And working on my debut story for TheCable with my mentor, Mr. Taiwo Adebulu, was another interesting experience. I like that he was sincere with me at every point of me going to the field down to writing the story to help me point out what was wrong in my story and what was right. And one of the things I learned during that process was asking the right questions when I go to the field, such that I don't have to come back and write something that people will not be able to relate to or find relevance in. And I'm so grateful to him for his patience and attention to me throughout the process. While I look forward to continuing with what Jeff has taught me, I really want to appreciate the Cable Newspaper Journalism Foundation and Osiwa for investing in me and the rest of my colleagues and providing a platform for us to grow. And I want to assure them that their investment will not go in vain. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, John Stone. Do we still have one more? Okay, Adetola, please, 1 minute.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning,
I'm sorry
Adetola.
for the problems. I didn't realize there were so many problems. Okay. Like I said, my name is Adetola Adiboke. I also participated in the training in December. I'm a student of Government of Communication and Language at University of Ibadan. As I said before, I took the training with TheCable newspaper. I was not aware of the details and intense work involved in investigative journalism. Now, I always knew it existed, but like most people, I assumed that it was like the things they taught us in class that we never really worked in real life. And I always thought going undercover was just for detectives in movies. But the training opened my eyes to the true job of a journalist. I learned that to be a journalist is to look for trouble. You know, they work hard to hold the government and representatives responsible for their actions. I got several tips in the training on how to get ideas, getting to the truth, and even the legal issues involved. And I was able to improve on my writing skills and my confidence. I was also able to discuss with my several colleagues from different countries, and that was a very nice experience. Through my mentor, I met several professional journalists in different fields, and I met important people who could serve as sources for news stories. And I learned how important it is to know people, to have a good relationship with different kinds of people, because it always helps your stories. I can honestly state that if not for my mentor, I would not have been able to participate in not one, but 2 undercover expeditions. And I was so proud to see my name published along with the stories. I would like to use this medium to thank my mentor, Mr. Femi Atoyebi, for all his help and guidance. I'm also grateful to the CEO, Mr. Simon Kolawole, Mrs. Abiose Adelaja, and of course, Madam Joke Kujena, and everyone at Osiwa. I can now consider journalism as my profession. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, thank you very much, Adetola. I think we now have Abiola Gule.
Yes, Abiola is here.
Okay, please, Abiola, just 30 seconds.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Abiola Gule. I hope you can hear me.
Go ahead.
All right, sir. So the training in Lagos started me off with the idea that there was actually more to journalism than just covering events and editing them from an online platform, but that through active investigative reporting, I can now hold government and society accountable. So at the training, I learned how to write effective pitches that told the story I was working on and pitches that would win grants to bring about change in the society. After the training, I was able to work on an investigative story on the NIN registration with the aid of my mentor, Mr. Taiwo Adebulu. I was able to engage the investigative techniques I'd learned and also write a report on my findings. And I think one thing I've learned, which would always keep me on my toes, is the reaction of the government to our story. A few days after the story was published, alongside the nationwide reports done by other reporters at TheCable, the federal government, through the National Identity Management Commission, broke the registration process down. And now we have much more centers around where we can all have registration done with ease compared to what used to exist before. So it means that governments can actually do the right thing, but sometimes they need the fourth estate to remind them of the need for it. Shouldn't always be so, but that's often the reality. So I'm very grateful for the experience. I'm grateful to TheCable and also everyone at Ostiwa. Thank you so much for the experience.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Abiola. And thank you so much, Mr. Femi Atoebi. We've heard it from Mr. Atoebi, and of course, the interesting testimonies from some of our colleagues from the campus who participated in the project. Now, we would like to call on our first speaker, Dr. Tunde Akoni, who is going to speak on from investigations to action, how investigative journalism can produce change.
Sorry,
Dr.
Femi.
Tunde Akoni.
Sorry, Femi. There's a short clip that needs to be played for viewers to see on investigation that was done. There's a short video that we're going to play now. I'm about to share my screen now.
Oh, okay.
Just for a few minutes before the first speaker will come on. Sure. Is the audio on?
May I move to the next agenda because I'm not making sense.
All right, Aji, I think we have technical issues with the audio. Yeah, what Aji is trying to show us is some of the works that have been produced under this project, but unfortunately the audio is bad. Ladies and gentlemen, guests and friends, we'll move to the next thing on the list here. And I also like to remind all of us that this webinar is being recorded, and we are also live on Facebook. All right, right now, welcome Dr. Tunde Akoni, first speaker. He's going to speak on from investigations to action, how investigative journalism can produce change. Dr. Tunde Akoni is an associate professor of journalism at the School of Communication, Lagos State University. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Akoni.
Good morning. I say good morning to the entire house.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Let me start by saying that I really found that those recalls by Adebola, Pilaka, and Ogunle are quite pleasant and inspiring. But I want to believe that when you come down to Lasso to do some fishing, we have as much pleasant recall as we have had this morning. Therefore, to say that I find it pleasurable to be here today will be an understatement, because I have had to be a journalist, and I'm still one. And I've also had to be a full-time change campaigner as a civil rights activist and even as a campaigner for policy implementation. You know, all of this taking advantage of my journalism background. It may interest you to know that I happen to be a member of a cohort of campaigners recently considered for funding by MacArthur Foundation. Now, to the students with us, you can see how indispensable a hardworking and ingenious journalist can be to our kind of society. Today, as a teacher, I don't want to be presumptive to anything that may have caught anyone's fancy here. All of us listened to Mr. Femi Owolabi read out the topic of my presentation. But I decided to do a reworking of the same topic. Now, as the investigative journalist, as a change agent in Nigeria. So let me share my impression of the original form of the topic, having reworked it. Communication students that we are, and because most of us are professionally ambitious young persons, it is better not to take anything for granted. But really, I would love to know if a few of us here read the articles I publish in the media, including TheCable. And I must thank TheCable online newspaper for publishing me always. I ask this question because my decision to rework this topic was actually precautiously explained in one of my recent articles. It was like I had a premonition that a session such as I'm having today will be coming up. That article was titled "An Applause for Mentors." I had recalled in that piece part of my unique good writing secrets that I had the opportunity of sharing with my mentees on a recent program supported by the Institute of War and Peace Reporting in the United States. In that piece, I asserted that there is hardly any topic or title characterized by colons that cannot be recast to be free of colons. What is needed is just an extra deep thinking. And this has worked for me every time, including the reworking of the title assigned me by the management of the TheCable Foundation. So you may check out the links to some of my recent articles, all of them published by TheCable and others. All of these titles are free of colons. And it wasn't as if I didn't have the temptation to cast titles or headlines that will have colons. So that was just by the way of preamble. Introduction. In research, there is an indispensable component called literature review. Sure, everyone here is familiar with that. But many, like the younger version of me, perhaps, may be tempted to want to switch off from this presentation for the mere mention of research being usually a boring experience. In any research. So, ladies and gentlemen, feel obliged to do the same here. How can anyone talk about just the efforts of some commendable performers who did their best for Nigeria? In other words, investigative journalism is the best, most rewarding genre of journalism. And I won't look too far to avoid loss from my beloved listeners this morning. I have not come here to do any eulogy, but to undertake a thoroughly functional interpretation of issues in such a way that every listener can look back and thank God that they invested their time on this online session most judiciously. As you all know, the currently running national budget for the year 2001, somewhat especially new rates to be paid as duties and levy types of vehicles. That budget initially gave the impression and all rates payable on vehicles being imported will be slashed. Issues arose. Although the budget was for 2021, as at February this 2021, the provisions weren't in any way near implementation. Can you imagine that? When the first meanwhile, at that time, I'm from the United States, and I had prematurely celebrated the seemingly exciting provision for reduced duties. Clear my car. And I discovered that a deputy of mine, Deputy Controller General of Customs friend of mine, don't seem to have any idea of the reduction I had been celebrating. But guess what happened? One of us here today, cables, it was that eventually did the magic. Shall we clap if possible? How did Wasila do it? Into the bulky budget document. I kept calling her for answers to questions. To those questions, my customs officer friend could. Wasila Tenash continued with her task. Consequently, she published an ad because she was the person reported about that particular section of the budget. So she went ahead to publish, which ultimately to own up to an error in the scripting of the year 2001. That press conference did the final clarification. So, ministry won't be modest enough to thank Wasilat and the CEO and friend, Simon. Those in that matter, like me, had honestly yearned. We are grateful. Thankful because rather than remain complete to sleep into demurrage, quickly strategize financially to organize COVID-19. Already COVID-19 delayed. I got it out just a relatively pretty small attributable to cable. The rest of us here are familiar with other investigations. What bigger evidence do we have recorded by the likes of TheCable journalist Fishayo Chuyombo, now the founder of FIJ, Foundation for Investigative. But let's probe into this art journalism very clearly, not tediously, because time won't. Cable needs, I must say, that last is worth considering for partnership on short refresher courses on investigation. What is the place of investigative journalism? According to intervention, Saeed Nazakat and the Adenwa Steve program of investigative journalism is go in depth to uncover corruption. It's at exposing public matters that are otherwise concealed. In the number of issues, for instance, the federal government alone once neglected by the gentlemen, counting till the close of business And I'm talking, and what about the governments at the 36, whole lot of them? And what about the governments spread everywhere of them? 776. That a past senator has just been reported to everyone against reposting some of his photographs with hush puppy. And those photographs that he had thought he in the past. These who, drunken with exhibitionism, had a film store of his ostentatious house. And then what about the sector, the media? Because we don't get them run by age. I don't want to talk about those things we do. We don't like exposed in the academia. Students tempt us to do. And those we are accused of forcing students to do. Here are hearing me right. Those bad things that academics do, this is like starting a debate. Do we have those who are ready to take of helping to sanitize the campuses here? Do we? I do hope that last rites are part of this, my audience today. If you are ready to make things work better on our campus, on my project, with which I plan to escalate corruption on Nigerian campuses. Resources available, I'm starting at. I call this my project Kakoka, of campaign against corruption on the campus. It is currently supported by the MacArthur Foundation earlier. Cable Foundation will buy into this soon, hopefully, or better support to bring in additional campuses. Most fundamentally, aims to alert members of the university community more refined than the time level of their endorsement or otherwise of corruption. In purging same system of it. I guess we'll have more time to course. The budding journalists here can immediately to complement our Kakoka intervention with the spirit of investigative journalists to drive efficient journalism that will usher in the desired changes. What would we say you need? What do you exactly to drive your wish for investigative journalism to the desired level? So let's go on to defining qualities of investigative journalists. Journalism, in some respects, can be glamorous. Yes, we get invited to, we get offers of dinners, to make high-level contacts. You have uncommon opportunities to interface with people, highly placed people, but then it's not always glamorous. And particularly for investigative journalism, what you need to get you going in the first place is your passion for the job. And I was excited when Adegoke, I think I hope I got that name right, now said, having gone through the experience that she underwent, she wants to now believe that a journalist. So welcome on board, Adebola. So you must genuinely treasure the truth and justice of whining and dining with the big and the powerful. The interest of your audience, or better still, the general public, all times reign supreme. You must always be inquisitive. You must be curious. The question are about things you see or hear about in your everyday life. See what became of your efforts on the NIN registration. Government eventually could not the efforts of Pilaka. And so all of enjoying today on this NIN could be to the efforts of Pilaka and other journalists who undertook investigation and saga. Your initiative, the initiative to come up with ideas, with story ideas, and especially it is our integrity challenge society. Not Iskandar, in the Ministry of an agency else will be digging its own grave at the end of Iskandar's here. Also be flexible as investigative journalists. When you are starting out on an, it's not unlikely that might tempt you to go in a particular, now that you have started and realities have started, you may have, don't hesitate, because truth is what must, and you must be consistent with that. It is also imperative to believe in team spirit, because it's not in all cases that you do your assignments alone. Your assignments may require diverse knowledge, all of which yourself. No fewer than 11 of these qualities have been identified, and I do believe that Cable Foundation will make this, my presentation, available to you very soon. So, but one other important point that I think I need to mention is that of the challenge of being loyal to the country, that may recall, that government may drum up to blackmail you from time to time, as if government officials actually are equivalent to the state. So you need to also ensure that in your presentations, in your reports, it is always boldly registered that it is the interest of the general public that actually motivated you to report or whatever story. So this change that you have always aspired to achieve, how do we get at the changes? all of the qualities that I just summarized are almost of equal importance. But be it noted that after all the legwork are done, qualities takes the lead. Investigative tasks may be presented in either the form of straight news or feature. Indeed, some others, like the Panama investigations that you all are familiar with, undertaken by the Premium Times and a large consortium of news organizations around the world, ended up being published as a book. So a good investigative reporter must endeavor to write without ambiguities. You must also be able to achieve what linguistics experts call mutual intelligibility. You must be able to genuinely pass the same message as it is with you to the entire audience that you have out there. The reporter's work ends at the point of publishing. It is for the rest of us in the larger society to ensure that the desired changes are achieved, having been armed with the necessary information. So how do investigative journalists function as a change agent? To this question. Constituency, and the third being the larger society. As for the first, the investigations ordinarily to change on to believe that everyone here believes this assertion. Several others across different sectors may have either to fail or joined in the situation. It is therefore more than imperative that support investigations that they should collectivize against evils of the society, because evil done to one is evil done to all. May I therefore use this opportunity to organization, MPO, to immediately set up what I will suggest to be Media Investigations Review Committee, MIRECO, should be given the task of tracking major investigations carried out by media organizations in Nigeria, with a view to engage in resolving the matters arising from the investigations. I would suggest that MIRECO should not operate alone, but get some respected statesmen involved from time to time, since such moves will be in the interest of, since this will be done without involving the organization that carried out the investigations, it will be difficult to attribute any pretty bias to such interventions. I will therefore call on the TheCable Foundation, the Premium Times Center for Investigative Journalism, and others to collaborate on how initiatives like MIRECO could be replicated for the campuses. And I think this should be given an accelerated attention. MPO may as well need to review its membership to accommodate more in view of the digital disruption that the media industry has recorded in the recent time. And for the opt-in time, I want to again call for the repeal of laws that may encumber investigative journalism, beginning with the Cybercrime Prohibitions Act of 2015. A major challenge, for instance, with that law is its exclusivist stance. One of its provisions, for instance, is the establishment of the Cybercrime Advisory Council, with no fewer than an exhaustive list, you will probably say. However, in the centrality of digital facilities to the operations, not a single media organization is listed. Who then can think sufficiently for media-inclined issues? But what do we see? The National Assembly is in some otherwise fairly well-crafted laws for repeal for the media. ladies and gentlemen, and I hope some of our submissions here find favor with ultimate implementation. Sincere thanks to you all for the right.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tunde Akani. That was quite a big one. And for me, the take home would be that as an investigative journalist, you have to be curious, you have to be inquisitive. Then above all, you must have good writing skills, yes. Write without ambiguities. I'm sure our colleagues from the campus have gained one or two things from what Dr. Akani shared with us. There is a room for questions. There's a room for questions.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? If you have any questions, please please drop in the chat box on this webinar. It's open to all. You can drop your questions for Dr. Tunde Akani. And while we await questions, we also like to welcome on board some of our trainers. We have Juliana Francis, we have Kayode Thomas, Unle Adebaju, Ajibola Amzat, and we have our very darling Mrs. Joke Kujenia. Thank you for coming on board. Okay, it appears we don't have any question. All right, we'll go for a 3-5 minutes break, and after that we converge for the.
Sorry, Femi, a question just came in.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the question that came. I quickly respond to that.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Doctor.
Yes. Thank you for that question. The project for now dedicated to the Lagos State University, and all the students are free to contact me to work with me on. I hope I will get more funding in future to get it applied to other companies.
Okay, I think we have another question. The project you talked about, sir, who
yes.
and who can apply?
Yes, that's what I just answered. That,
okay.
Yes, it's only LASU students for now that can engage with me on that.
Okay, then there's
only enough for me to work at LASU.
All right, there's another question here.
Okay.
What differentiates investigative journalism from news report writing? We have it from the questions from Shoaib Badmos.
Okay. Shoaib, the simplest way to respond to you is that basic news writing, basic news reporting is just a strand of investigative. A strand of investigative journalism. You can do feature outcome of your findings. You can also do straight news reports. But, I will always encourage you to aspire, because that's the only way you can get to register your name boldly as in this practice.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akani.
Yeah.
I think I would also like to throw one question to you.
Okay.
We've had, of course, some of our campus journalists who have shown interest in investigative journalism. And how do you advise in the case where a student, say for instance, in the Lagos State University wants to investigate perceived corrupt practices within the university system? You know, there's been fear of victimization from management, authority, and all of that. How do you advise some of our campus journalists who want to look, within their own institution to report, to investigate a thing? How do you advise such students to go about this?
Yeah. Thank you. You see, such students, they need to be straightforward. They must be focused on what they want to do. And when and if they run into stormy waters, they should realize that they can come and talk to some of us who don't do any other thing outside, journalism is the only thing that we do. Let me share with you an experience I had recently. I'm sure you are aware that on some of our very senior academics at LASU, be a director of Premium Time Center for Investigative Journalism. Several people on the campus just assumed that, yes, Tunde Akaninda was giving them away. So if a student is working on a story and he suspects that he may likely be betrayed, to hide his head, consult some of us, confidence in us, because it's important to also identify, and then we'll make sure that we guide them appropriately so that nothing dangerous. It is doable. As a matter of fact, one thing that we currently lack for now is the sheer complacency on the part of our students not to want to get involved, campus journalism activities, especially investigative journalism. So this is an opportunity to appeal to them that no angel, it's not a fly in from wherever to come and make their campuses better for them. All of those nasty experiences that they keep encountering from officials of the university, from colleagues and some other quarters, could get better if they are also ready to work to improve on the situations. That's my.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I think we have one more question from Mr. Toebi. You mentioned setting up a media investigation review committee.
Yes.
The question is, who will be the members? What will be the mandate? How best can it work? Can you shed more light on this?
I call it Media Investigations Review Committee. The idea is the MPO, which is an umbrella organization, the NUJ and MPAN. These are media bodies. They should be able to set up this, I call it committee. Each of these three organizations can nominate representatives to serve on the committees. Committee to track all of the major investigations carried out in Nigeria. And because of the importance that may have been investigated, let them now work on how they can collaborate with men in the society to engage with the concerned authorities, concerned organizations, to straighten whatever may appear unclear or not. For instance, look at this NIN registration. In fact, my own concern with the Ministry of Digital Communications, Ministry of Communication Digital Economy, predated the NIN matter. When the minister came in and he decided to rename that ministry, Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy, I found that somewhat exclusivist. Digital economy as it not apply to all the rest spheres of our life. Indeed, at the center of the operations of the media today is digital technology. So I wanted that ministry to be renamed Ministry of Communication and Digital Culture, not Digital Economy. And I didn't just ruminate within myself. I volunteered an opinion, also published by Cable, and no fewer than 15 other platforms. So Miracle should be a committee that will be set up by the media organizations that make up MPO, that we also take the task of tracking investigations done by media organizations. Miracle, we have to also co-opt elder statesmen to be able to work on these issues. This society belongs to all of us. We don't have two countries. Nigeria is the only one that we have. And it is incumbent on all of us to ensure that this nation gets better than we have it today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akani. That was quite an interesting session. Dr. Akani is an associate professor of journalism at the School of Communication, Lagos State University. I think at the end of this webinar, we are going to make available your presentation to all of the participants. All right. While we take a coffee break, I would like to invite one of our trainers, Juliana Francis, briefly to share a few experiences with our campus journalist. Juliana?
Good morning.
Sorry, yeah?
Good morning.
Yes, you have the floor.
Okay. Oh, so good to be here. I was very, very happy when I saw the name Adetola as one of the people that participated in an investigation and bringing out a good report. And this is because I'm passionate about women, female reporters being involved in investigative reporting. And not just that, in our newsrooms, I'm passionate about seeing more female reporters in our newsroom. And for every campus journalist that participated in this program, please do keep in touch with TheCable. Keep in touch with your mentors. The end of this program doesn't mean it has come that your journalism or your participation in journalism has come to an end. Remember what Dr. Akoni said. passion. Passion is the most important thing in journalism, not just only investigation anyway. So please do keep in touch. And one thing I want to tell you again, just because you are in school or still in school doesn't mean you can't come up with stories, ideas that you can investigate. When you have such ideas, approach TheCable, because I have to tell you the truth. Some people think some journalists are not intelligent because they don't do investigation, but it's actually because of money. Journalists, investigative journalists cost money, and it takes time. It takes a lot of patience too. So if you have something that you think you want to uncover, something you think you want to, that you are curious about, you are inquisitive about, and you want to expose, please do approach TheCable. I'm sure that they will be able to guide you, narrow the story down for you, and then of course help you to achieve the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana. I think the whole essence of what she's saying is that for most of our campus journalists, the door is always open at the foundation for you to pitch your investigative ideas. And because we're rounding off this project does not mean that you can't submit your ideas for publication consideration. So we'll always like to welcome you whenever you have some of these ideas. Of course, you all know how to go about the pitch submission and the process. All right, I suppose we've had our coffee break. We'll now move on to the next thing here, which will invite our second speaker for today, Mrs. Stella Dean Jacob. She's the Director, News Television, Continental TVC. Mrs. Dean Jacob will speak on youth participation in democratic process, the role of campus journalists. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mrs. Dean Jacob.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for this opportunity to contribute to this exciting set of topics. I would like to say thank you very much to my brother, Simon Kolawole, for inviting me to be part of this, and Joke Kujenya. I do hope that my contribution to this would add some value and to get our youth, as well as campus journalists who are the journalists of the future, to understand that from now on, easy lies the head that wears the crown, and they must be up to the task, and they must understand that responsibility is reposed in them to give it their all. Now, I took the pains to go into the history of youth participation in the democratic process for one reason. Before Nigeria became independent, we had a lot of youth movements, and those youth movements did a lot to ensure that we are where we are today in terms of moving from the pre-colonial era to staying on top and on track with what happened at independence, leading to all of the coups and military interregnums, which stifled and stunted our growth and development, and subsequently the push to restore democracy, and then with the restoration of democracy, the challenges. I've also tried to basically put in perspective why the youth are critical to the democratic process, and the fact that with their numbers, they must understand that those numbers should not just be numbers for the heck of it, but numbers because of the fact that with those numbers, they are in a position to effect positive change. The question is, how do you go about effecting positive change? Abiosa, would you mind? Okay, you're sharing the slides. Now, my first set of slides are basically looking at the demographics. As of today, Nigeria's population is estimated at 211 million. And out of that 211 million, 60% are youth, are below 25. Now, what is the definition of a youth? In 2009, it was 18 to 35. Today, it is between the ages of 18 and 25. according to the, today, the African Charter says 15 to 35, but the United Nations allows for national context to basically guide who fits into this bracket. Now, if you look at the population of Nigeria, the 2018 estimates from the CIA World Factbook, right? We've broken the numbers down, and this is what it amounts to. You have from 0 to 14, 42.5%, the 15 to 24, 19.8%, and the 25 to 54, the 30.44%. So effectively, 62% of Nigerians today are below the age of 25. Now, I've talked about the fact that our population today is 211 million, and a lot of reasons have been given for why our population is growing without control. And you see that we're a youthful population. That's why there was need to break this down, because there is a nexus between youthful population, what we have today, the gerontocracy in Nigeria, and the fact that campus journalists are basically, need to understand what it is they must focus on if they want to be able to give the backing and support to this young generation of leaders for the future who see Nigeria as a country for the younger generation who have much more to offer. Now, if you look at the statistics, right, 2.6% accounts for persistent high fertility over a period of time. Our total fertility rate is 5.3%, whilst our crude birth rate means that for every 1,000 people, 38 people are born. Now, this is startling, this is shocking. By the year 2030, our population would increase to 263 million. And by 2050, would increase to 401 million, representing a growth rate of 49% in 20 years. So what does this basically mean? We are becoming younger. And if we're becoming younger, there is a nexus for things that the younger generation should keep in focus to be front and center and on the front burner of everything that we do. Now, as we speak today, 13.9% of Nigerian youth account for the number of people who are employed. Now, let's go back to the democratic process and how it began when the youth in Nigeria, once upon a time, yes, anybody who was 80 years old was 25 and 30 and being in the forefront of the agitation for the return to self-determination, independence, and for basically their fight against colonial rule. Now, these were the stages in which the Nigerian youth participated, from colonialism to pre-independence and up to restoration today and all of the challenges that it has posed. As far back as 1935, the Nigerian Youth Movement, which was the first nationalistic organization, set up this movement led by Professor Eyoita as far back as 1935, and saw the likes of H.O. Davis and Nnamdi Azikiwe, who were student leaders in the United States and the United Kingdom, come back to Nigeria in 1937 and in 1938. And what was the mission of this movement? It is basically no different from what our youth are doing today. That's why there was a need for this history and the nexus, and to bring it close to what it is we're doing today and what we're not doing. And basically, the mindset and the thinking then was to foster political advancement and also to enhance the socio-economic status of Nigerian citizens. Now, they made such headway that in 1938, this youth movement was able to remove from power the NDP, led by Herbert Macaulay, when they won the elections for the Lagos Town Council, which basically was said to have ended the dominance of this political party. Now, before independence, there was another youth, Anthony Enaharu. In 1953, he was 30 years old. He was the one who was said to have moved the motion, the first motion for Nigeria's independence. But others may disagree, including Femi Fani-Kayode, who has basically said nothing could have been taken away from him, but Nigerians are misinformed. That is not the subject for this conversation, but I just felt the need to show that if he was the one who moved it first, and there's an argument that says he did a lot to get us to where we are, but in fact, it was the motion that was moved in 1958, which was the third motion that brought us to where we are. Now, through the years and through all the decades, we went from where the youths fought and agitated and got us to where we are. We went to independence. From independence, we entered the period of the interim, January 15th, 1966, until the handover to a democratically elected government in 1999. And through all of this, the youth movement went about when they decided in 1935 to come together to fight for the causes of the common man. Now, I want to draw a nexus between the Ali Must Go protests in 1978 and the NSAS protest of 2020, which resulted in Black Tuesday and basically changed the history of protest, changed the perception of people who may have seen our youth, the Generation X, the Millennium period, and our youth who basically may have lost their way or did not understand what it meant to be a youth who lived in Nigeria. But I'm sure that NSAS had basically taken it back to the minds, the hearts and minds of those who in 1978 started what then was seen as a violent agitation, not because they were violent, but for the simple reason that under a military junta led by then General Murtala Mohammed and Olusegun Obasanjo, who went on to become Nigeria's first democratically elected president in 1999 after 16 years of continuous military rule. What were their demands? It was to reverse the increment in fees and which would have led to an increase in meal tickets. 50 kobo was what was an issue. But if you remember what 50 kobo was then, and if you were going to value what 50 kobo is today from what it was then, we all know what it meant. Now, this protest did not get the government then to reverse what the issue was, but it brought into the consciousness the fact that Nigerian students could stand their ground, Nigerian students could take headlong on security agencies, including the police and the military, who were sick on Nigerian students, and resulted in the death of Akintunde Ojo and 8 other unnamed persons in Zaria to this day, the rustification of Segun Okewu, who was a foremost youth leader and leader of the Students' Association, and some university officials who basically probably provided some kind of traction for this. Now, let's go to today and all of the issues with our Nigerian youth, and where I believe the role of campus journalists needs to be expanded beyond what it is we see. In those days growing up and when I was a lot younger, maybe 20, 25 years ago, campus journalism really really on issues as it affected youth outside of campus, as it affected youth and their way of life. It may not have been. But with the advent of democracy and of course, the information superhighway, globalization, and the development of big technology companies, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the likes of it, online publications, citizen journalism, community-based journalism, and all of that. That again spiked something in the ability to basically share information across borders and seamless too. Now, let me take you back to 1927, where a young man called John Akinlade Colquitt, who graduated from university in 1910, had acquired the Lagos Daily News in 1927 with Herbert Macaulay, who was a lot older, but he, to all intents and purposes, would have been under 40 when he did that. Let me also draw a nexus between Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was an activist, who was a student leader, and who was a politician, but understood the power and the importance of the press. We also see the Tribune newspapers and the involvement of the Awolowo family in those days, where even when you had colonial rule, they functioned as the voice of the people in Nigeria and West Africa, who needed to understand the ills of indirect rule and colonialism and how that blazed a trail. And of course, you know, in those days, when was television introduced? When was the radio introduced? So you just had very limited access to anything that was media. But today, we are washed with the good, the bad, the ugly. The bad, the ugly are giving linear media organizations a run for their money in terms of what you're able to post. And of course, we know that traditional media are regulated more than the bloggers, more than those who can just set up a page and those who can post on Twitter, Facebook, and whatnot. We are all witnesses today to what we see, the Twitter imbroglio between the federal government and the owners of Twitter, and the impact of social media in today's Nigeria, especially with this NSAS protest. Now, campus journalists are basically the youth. Their ages range from between 18 to 35 at the most, and 35 probably would be those who are either students who are not doing first degrees. I'm just being liberal with that. So at the end of the day, they basically form a bridge between the old, the millennials, the Generation Zs, and those who are middle-aged. They are poised better to understand what was then and what is now. And one of the questions I would want to have to ask some of the young mentees on this conference is basically, how are they keyed into all of the youth advancements ahead of the year 2023? Not too young to run. Yaga, a champion that at the end of the day, that was passed into a bill. That bill was passed into law. Where are we after that bill was passed into law? Who is in the federal legislature that can be defined or said to be a youth? How have they followed up in the reduction in age for political office holders? How have they followed up with NSAS? All of a sudden, NSAS has died down. Nobody is even talking about the demands that NSAS made, that regrettably, that movement was hijacked by hoodlums and people who, at the end of the day, wanted to ensure that the Nigeria of the dreams of the youth would not be realized. How many have followed up on the registration of the youth political party, which would give them the legitimacy and the pathway to be participants, not passive, but active participants in 2023? We should also note that there's been a milestone increase from 1% to 32.4% from 2015 to 2019, when we saw active youth participation. So if our youth are continuing in the trend of their fathers and their grandfathers before them, because youth participation in the democratic process and in the business of journalism, whether on campus or not, is not alien to us. But it's just that over time, have we sat on this right and refused to understand the power that the youth command? Have we decided to basically bury our heads in the sand and refuse to understand that whether you put an adjective before the word journalist, whether you're a campus journalist, whether you're a community journalist, whether you're a broadcast journalist, or whether you're a print journalist, have you used that to basically advance the causes for which the youth hold dear? Who is going to tell the story of the youth, if not campus journalists, who would seek to remove themselves from that bucket and that narrow confine, and basically broaden their minds and understand that whether you're a journalist who is on campus or not on campus, you are youth. And these things affect you as much as they affect the youth who are political activists, are involved in civil society, are high flyers in the corporate world, are entrepreneurs, and are basically innovators. The question again is, do you understand the power of the numbers? This is not a challenge, but it is just for us to think deeply and then to understand that we need to go beyond the rhetoric and sometimes what is the entitlement complex, and suggest to the older generation that we have indeed come of age and we're ready for that. Sometimes when you have conversations with senior members of society who are politicians, you hear them being skeptical. They say, our youth are not interested. But if you go back to 1966, if you go back to 1960, the Minister of Finance, Chief Festus Okotie-Eboh, how old was he? He wasn't 35. He was a youth. If you look at the then military head of state, this is not justifying it, but like history, we cannot rewrite history. How old was he when he became head of state, military head of state in 1966? So at the end of the day, it is now being thrown back to the youth of today. Do you understand the power of your numbers? Do you understand what you need to do differently at a time when, yes, we're under democracy, but at a time when our nation is so polarized, at a time where poverty is on an upward swing, at a time where religious sentiments are all over the place, at a time where the state of insecurity is a serious cause for concern, at a time when our young democracy continues to be threatened and imperiled by all of the things as simple as a disregard for court orders, a disregard for the Constitution, and all of that. How many have keyed into the registration of the youth political party ahead of 2023? Now, the challenge again is campus journalists are witnesses to all of these things. You read the papers, you interact with people, you are affected, right? When your school fees are increased and the purchasing power of your wards and your parents have not increased, what happens? It puts a strain. When you sit down in class and at the end of the day, lecturers go on strike, what happens? A course that should last 3 years ends up lasting longer than you would dare to imagine. When at the end of the day, you do not graduate with other people who are your contemporaries, but who are probably in other universities at home or abroad, then what happens? So with all of this, are you guys now ready to take up the challenge and challenge the status quo and become the voice of the youth? For one reason, because you are, to all intents and purposes, the youth. And you more than anybody understands where it pinches you most. And you are in the best position to be objective and to strike a balance, as opposed to being emotional and as opposed to going the aluta continua route, which to a certain extent is a turnoff for some people who still maintain that our youth don't get it and our campus journalists are not seized in the ways in which they can basically tell their stories that can do justice to their counterparts who are basically on the streets and in different endeavors trying to fight for the future of the youth. Now, this may come as hard-hitting and being hard, but it is what needs to be said. I'm a broadcaster by profession, but by training, I'm a lawyer. And for every day that I wake up and go to work, I'm able to thank the good Lord for grounding me in my profession. Because the fact that I'm a trained lawyer has, to all intents and purposes, schooled me and given me a mindset which helps me with the way I go to tell my stories on a daily basis. Let me backtrack a bit and give you some personal experiences. Now, there are times when, let me use the NSAS thing, for example. You know that TVC, where I work, was torched. And if you were following what was going on social media, we were being threatened by all sorts of people who thought to this day, and it is still a subject that is in contention, that our reporting was not balanced, that our reporting didn't favor the youth, and that we basically were not saying it as it is. Now, we are guided by rules and regulations. A journalist who works in a linear channel, whether radio, television, broadcast genre, which is where I belong, cannot sit down in the studio and say 10 people were shot dead on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway if we haven't seen it and if we haven't confirmed it. So you would want to play safe because, first of all, we're regulated by the NBC. And because of the fact that we're regulated by the NBC, we need to make sure that we're putting out facts. Now, if at the end of the day, we report that 10 people were killed on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and we say it is Lagbaja.com organization that was behind it. And we now realize that 10 people may have been killed, but it was not Lagbaja.com, or 10 people were not even killed. What do you think happens? We've lost credibility. And you see how angry the average Nigerian is, maybe through no fault of their own. What would now happen? If we went on a frolic of our own without confirming the information, either way we would be pilloried. Now, if we now exercise restraint, at the end of the day, we become the monsters who are collaborating with people we shouldn't be collaborating with. It's a simple sentence. Soldiers fired shots fired into the air to disperse protesters. And another medium reports shots fired at protesters, killing protesters. One basically was erring on the side of caution because you saw gunshots and guns pointed upwards into the sky, but without a doubt, as it was pointed upwards into the sky to disperse protesters, gunshots, if they were live rounds of ammunition, would have fallen to the ground, and in that process, anything could have happened. It was different from soldiers actually shooting into a crowd of protesters. Again, some can say it's semantics. Some can say that we will argue it from today until tomorrow. But this is not what this is about. But it is just certain instances where responsibility is thrust on you and you would have to strike a balance. Now, I've also covered wars across the West African sub-region. And indeed, in the early days of all of the incidents we see, and we're still seeing it today. Again, we know that Boko Haram and ISWAP have waged a war, proportions that nobody can ever imagine. They've decimated populations. There are people still in, children still in captivity. Some people's lives have been ruined. Soldiers who are fighting gallantly have died. And at the end of the day, we are none the wiser or closer to where we're headed. Now, if you're faced in the situation where you sit on a desk as an editor or some gatekeeper, there's so many things that you take into consideration. One of it is the need to know and the right to know. And this is another poster which I hope our budding journalists outside of campus would engage me on. Now, when you have a situation where you feel that Boko Haram has probably decimated maybe a platoon of soldiers, and every day you're displaying the bodies of soldiers on television, you're basically talking about the fact that one Alpha jet has been downed and we have 2 more Alpha jets that are not serviced. What do you think this does to the morale of the military? I'm not a military apologist. I'm not making excuses for them. But you see, what do? You empower the terrorists to think they have the advantage. When at the end of the day, we do not have the facts to balance our story or write our story in such a way that it talks about what the military is doing and what they're not doing and how, then we put ourselves in a situation where one wonders, do we understand what's going on? I have said it to a couple of friends privately, that this word democracy should be subjective to the geographical entities and locations. What is the origin of democracy? Nigeria's democracy is based on America's style of democracy. We were colonized by the British. We do not run a parliamentary system. You know, we don't have a situation where if you're the prime minister of Nigeria and you lose your seat, you come into government. No, you're first a member of parliament before you're a political office holder. So these are some of the issues and these are some of the challenges. Now, the average youth today, let's take the broader perspective from 15 to 35, was not born in 1960, was not born in 1914 when there was the amalgamation. In 1999, probably was how old, may not have understood how we got to 1999 and how the media basically fought the Abacha junta to a standstill. Then again, the rules were different because a lot of people were endangered and were imperiled by all of the brutality that occasioned that time in our history. So it was common to see editorial meetings under trees. It was common to see editorial meetings taking place everywhere outside of the offices. But then they stood for something at that period and were able to go hammer and tongs at it and basically expose the ills of that period in our lives. But then with the advent of democracy came the 1999 Constitution, which a lot of people have argued that that Constitution and that statement, we the people, is not autochthonous. I remember civil society were speaking to General Abdulsalami Abubakar, who was head of state, who took over from General Sani Abacha, who died in office. And it was basically, you know, he said he was going to be in office for 10 months. And it was basically, we need to rework the Constitution. And his response to civil society and all of the pro-democracy groups was, this is your business, it is your headache. I said I was going to exit the stage on the 29th of May. I have no business with tampering or tinkering with the Constitution. That's your headache. And he left. 1999 to date, our Constitution has continued to go through the motions of, are we going to tinker with it? Are we going to change certain provisions? Are we going to get a Constitution that reflects all of the things that we're seeing that are the reasons for agitation? I don't know if you remember when Sani Yerima imposed the Sharia and how that basically was in the consciousness of Nigerians until such a time that, as usual, Nigerians go through the agitation and then all of a sudden it fizzles out. So we're here today, again, looking at the fact that for as long as the youth are alive and they have breath, they understand that they must own the democratic process and grow with it and continue to revamp it. For one reason, the majority of Nigerians today are the youth, are under 25. By 2050, Nigeria's population will grow to 401 million. They've already projected that in 2030, we would grow from 211 million to 263 million. So it just basically means we need to get our skates on, either as campus journalists or as the youth movement of today, and ensure that our youth participation constructively engages with everyone who is a stakeholder, whether young, whether underage, whether old age, or whether has spent so long in government to a point where they need to be reorientated. We need to make sure that we remain on this trajectory where we capture the hearts and minds of our constituents who make up for more than 60% of Nigeria's population, to get everybody to understand what the issues are. The Nigerian youth have remained dogged, they've remained dynamic, they've remained diverse, they've remained daring. And in their own way, they're aided by big technology groups because it is the rave of the moment. Once upon a time, television sets did not exist. Today, television sets are an endangered species because a time will come, and that time is already here, where on your mobile device, you can watch whatever it is you want to watch, not necessarily in real time. It means you can rewind and you can fast forward. That is the reality of today. And this is what campus journalists must also now start to focus on. If we go back to the NSAS agitation, which have likened to the Ali Mosque Road protests that gained traction, NSAS defied borders. You had big technology companies providing support. You had some parts of corporate Nigeria, indeed the parents of NSAS, the NSAS generation, coming out to support with money, with things in cash and in kind, and basically lining up behind them. This movement that was NSAS, that started with the agitation to disband this police group. Many ask, why did they take on NSAS? They took on NSAS because the youth were the ones who were at the receiving end of police brutality. You stop a young man who is probably affluent, who's wearing dreadlocks, who's driving an SUV, who has the latest Mac computer, who has the latest iPhone, who has the latest iPad, and you put him through the ringer and pronounce him a criminal before you give him, if at all, the opportunity to demonstrate to you that he has worked hard for his money. You're stopping people and forcing them to basically open their laptops. We all know what the Constitution talks about, stop and search. From a legal perspective, the only time you can basically stop somebody and search is when there is reasonable suspicion. What is reasonable suspicion? It is not just a function of semantics. Even when the Inspectors General of Police successively would say to Nigerians, we have removed roadblocks, you will still see the illegal checkpoints where a policeman stops you for the simple reason that he wants to say, how far, well done, anything from me, and the likes of that. So you see, as I've said again, the youth have always been locked on to the most. In the 1930s, it was to free themselves from the shackles of colonial rule. As we approached the 1960s, it was basically the push for independence. As we got into successive military governments from 1966 until the Ali Must Go incident in 1978, it was for a better quality of life and again, for the democratization process to begin. Now, all of those had not ended. And as I kept on saying to human rights and civil society in 1998 and 1999, basically, if you've gone through all of this and you've enthroned and entrenched democracy and the tenets of it and what the meaning of the word democracy means, where does your work end or where does it start? It is one thing to inaugurate and swear in a democratically elected government at the federal level and at state levels, all to local government level. It is another thing to police the different arms of government. Because who are we? We're journalists. One of the ladies talked about the fact that, talked about the good vibes she got from the mentoring sessions, and talked about the fact that there was something she said, I can't really remember what she said, but I made a note and basically said, journalism is not a profession, it is a way of life. It is what you sleep, you eat, you breathe. If you think journalism is a 9-to-5 job where you've cast your headlines, your story has been put to bed, then it means that you don't even understand what Nigerian journalism expects of you, especially because of all of the challenges we need to continue to come in contact with. So basically, the work of a campus journalist today goes beyond just sitting in your studios and basically talking about all things campus. It now means that you must expand in ways that you cannot even begin to imagine. What is thrust on you and what the youth are trying to do to secure a future that is credible, that is promising, that will flourish for their generations yet unborn. What does it mean to be a journalist? To be a journalist and be a campus journalist today in this time of social media, where you have so many strands of information, too much information, and not knowing what to believe and what not to believe. It just means you must double down and learn to tell a better story and learn to use your digital platforms in ways that you've never used it. Now, everybody is a photographer with their phone. You can take award-winning pictures on any of your phones and basically post online. You're going on the road and outside your campus, you basically see something that is untoward. All you need to do is take that picture and then with your powers of analysis, just basically continue to inform your constituents. We must also continue to understand that research, as my brother Dr. Akoni had said, which is the most daunting task research, background information, diligence, analysis is what will drive journalism at all levels today. You must scratch beneath the surface, you must dig, you must dive, you must look for what is not there. We've gone from who, what, when, where, and how in telling our stories into looking for angles that nobody will tell, where your background story paints a picture, where you can weave unconnected things that make sense and give a perspective. That is what we must learn to do as we stay on top of what it is the youths have been agitating. And it is for one reason. The youths have always been involved in the issues as they affect the nation as a people. And our demographics basically also shows that the youth represent a majority of Nigeria's population. So who should own the narrative, whether in the course of being involved in the democratic process, or whether it's in the course of activism, or whether it is in the course of being innovators and entrepreneurs? But one thing is also certain: there must be constructive engagement and strategic thinking if journalists on campus are going to give weight and meaning to all of the fantastic things that the Nigerian youth are doing, especially in ensuring that our democracy continues to go from strength to strength. No democracy is perfect, but it is work in progress. But one of the things we must ensure as journalists is we must continue to hold even our youth to account. Even as your campus journalist, you must continue to hold them to account and ask them questions. Are you ready for leadership? Are you ready to give weight to what you're saying? Do you mean what you're saying? Do you believe in what you're saying? Are you adding value to the people who you're seeking their participation? Do you understand that the business of democracy is not to advance yourself materially? Do you understand that we have a right to engage you in ways that may suggest that you probably have derailed from what it is you set out to do? And to that regard, campus journalism, the way we know it now, must be invented. And as I said, I'm striking this note again. You must be objective, because if you're objective, you appeal to the young, the old, you appeal to those who have and who do not have. You appeal to the downfall driver, you appeal to the Nigerians in the diaspora. You appeal to even those who you want to send a message to them, suggesting to them that they have failed in one way or the other. You must be able to disseminate credible information across all media. And I've also stressed the importance of digital platforms. Student body they were keyed into what was going on, and they stood firm and provided that global information dissemination platform for those who were in Nigeria and whose lives were in danger. A lot of them went underground and made sure that that message was not lost. So beyond those who were fighting here, you had those who were abroad, amongst them journalists who lost their lives, many who fled using the Nadeko route just because they believed in a principle and an ideal. And what did they do? They appealed to everyone. So in the course of wanting to tell your stories as journalists, your messages must appeal to a broad section of society. And this must be so for one major reason. Nigeria's future lies with its dynamic, diverse, and dogged youth. You all see the future so clearly. But the trick to seeing this future clearly and getting what you want is being tactical and strategic as you advance conversation, as you put out there your challenges, as you put out there those things that you hold dear in advancing the causes for even generations yet unborn. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jacob. Ms. Jacob is Director, News, Television, Continental, TVC. In the last few minutes, she has been talking to us on youth participation, democratic process, the role of campus journalist. And I particularly enjoyed how she, took us on an historical lane and then matched it with what's obtainable in the recent time. We'll open the floor for questions for Mrs. Jacob. Is there any questions, contribution? Questions and contributions? Yeah, let me start with my own question, Mrs. Jacob. I want to ask, how do we really differentiate between activism and then campus journalism? From your presentation, you made mention of the Ali Must Go, protest then, and you will see that the protest actually started as a form of activism. It started with campus activists, comrades, if you like it, and then before the whole thing took the center stage at the time. And recently too, we've seen how journalists work hand in hand with civil society organizations and all of that. So, but back to campus journalism, can you really highlight the differences between being a campus journalist and then being an activist? Is it something you can combine, or are they even the same thing? How do you differentiate between them?
Okay, thanks for that question. To a certain extent, it's splitting hairs. You can be an activist, but not a journalist, because what does it mean to be a journalist? You basically, as a journalist, there's a presumption of independence where you're able to gather information from the activist, from the protagonist and the antagonist. And you step back as a journalist and you listen to what everybody has to say, and that's what you piece together. It is possible to be an activist, right? And it is possible to be an activist and a journalist, but you must now understand that when you wear the toga of the one who is reporting an issue, you must step back from your involvement in what is going on and giving a broader perspective. So if I was a student at the University of Lagos who supported the Ali Must Go protest, if I'm out on the street protesting, I'm not going to write in my report that I took part in the protest, because once you do that, you negate the principle of objectivity in the course of journalism. So a campus journalist for me basically should be someone who knows what is going on, but removes or detaches themselves from the story in order to tell that story and look at all sides of the story. It is not to say that you disagree with the protest or you agree with the protest. That's not an issue. But what is an issue is you are now stepping back and looking at every aspect of that story, not just the feeling of the students who went out onto the streets, but also the state of the economy, the reason why government decided that they were going to increase the fees, whether rightly or wrongly so is not the issue. But your ability to step back and just basically give a broader perspective of what the issue is what should be expected. You see, campus journalists are the youth as well. And that's why I made the point saying that you will have to hold to account the activists amongst you and the politicians, the social interpreters, because you're members of the fourth realm of the estate, and there is a constitutional duty reposed in you to keep everybody in check. You cannot be an activist and say you want to keep someone in check, Because if you're part of that activism, then your mindset and your leaning is already skewed in favor of that cause which you're supporting. As journalists, regardless of whatever our private thoughts are, it must never factor into the equation. You may be empathetic to a story that you're telling, but if your empathy is such that it jades your ability to be objective, then your reportage becomes questionable, and to a certain extent, you can be accused of being unprofessional. Does that answer your question? Did that answer your question? I can't hear you.
Yes, ma. We have a few questions here. Tohibat, she's asking, in situations of untrue or biased story, how do you suggest amendment is made? And then a second question concerning information harmful to the public, will you suggest they are left unchecked, or in what way can such be reported?
What I usually say to journalists who I work with and who I speak with, whether we like it or not, we're human beings. There is always an element of bias. But truly speaking, you just must make sure that in your bias, you're responsible. And when you create an opportunity where there's bias, you must get somebody else to give another perspective to your bias. But in the course of bias, there's certain things you don't say in the course of filing a report. You cannot afford to be judgmental. So it means that even where you find that you've been biased, there's something called a right to redress. So if indeed there's probably a formal complaint and you've been accused of bias, what you need to do is give the other side the right to reply. So in doing that, your bias has been negated by the person's ability to reply. Now, harmful information, this is something we deal with every day. I am not one who would say, kill a story or bury a story, but let us always take into consideration, does this need to be told? If I tell the story, is there a limit as to what to say? And if there's that limit as to what to say, how am I going to look at it? And if it is a story that needs to be told, are you going to ensure that you balance that negativity that is likely to whittle down the importance of that story and would redress some of the issues so that it would not be seen to look like you do not understand what's going on. Nigeria is a country that is on edge, and all you need to do now is report something that offends the sensibilities of someone, and you will see the reaction in ways that you cannot imagine. So I've oftentimes advocated the ability to self-censure oneself, knowing how far not to go, and thinking about, if I report this, what would happen? Is it in the best interest? And if I need to skirt around the surface, how do I report it in such a way that it wouldn't look like I have decided to kill a story? So it's a judgment call that you must make, because different things give room for different considerations. So it depends on what it is. If you're more specific, then I can be more specific with my response. But at the end of the day, issues of national security is where you oftentimes have problems. Like, in Nigeria, there's nobody who would know that there is a coup in Nigeria today and go and break the news and say, breaking news, a coup would happen tomorrow. Has anybody done that? Nobody is going to do it. So you see, automatically, we all censure ourselves, because you know the rule. If you're able to report that a coup is going to happen, and if that coup happens, you're part of that conspiracy, and you would spend forever and a day explaining what your source of information is and all of that. So these are some of the things I'm looking at. When we talk about self-censorship, for me, where it has to do with a minor, one needs to be very careful, because a minor is a minor and a minor needs to be protected. If, for example, now we've seen a number of rape cases where you see people defiling children that are 7 and 8 years old, that's a story that must be told. But the question you would ask yourself is, in telling the story, are you going to name the child? Are you going to show the face of the child? And even when the family insists on you showing the face of the child, are you going to breach etiquette and the rules and now expose this underage child who has already been defiled and will live with stigma for the rest of his or her life? So those are some of the considerations in when we say, when you strike a balance in what it is you report and what you choose not to report, and how you choose to report it. I can't hear you. Unmute, please.
Thank you very much. Before we move to the next question, we have a suggestion from Dr. Lambe Mustafa. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Mustafa. Dr. Mustafa is head of department, mass communication University of Ilorin. His suggestion is campus journalism should take on the gauntlet in contributing to reorientation of the youth against contemporary quick reach syndrome, as well as other corner-cutting mentalities that make them not only looking unprepared for leadership, but showing that they are seemingly worse than the generations they should take on for a better future for Nigeria. Thank you for that contribution, Dr. Mustafa. We have a question from Biodun Oluwagbemi. He's asking, how can the youth's cravings, agitations be gratified through journalism? And then we have a question from one of our campus journalists. He's asking, can a campus journalist also be involved in campus politics?
Let me take the second question. Can a campus journalist also be involved in campus politics? Of course, nothing stops you from being involved in campus politics. The thing is, let's understand that you're one human being. You can wear different hats. So when you're involved in the politics of campus, you're involved in that. But when you have to report the politics of campus, that's when you need to demonstrate that you are stepping back from the politics of campus and wearing another hat, being a journalist. Okay, the other question is about justifying youth cravings and Femi, please unmute. Unmute.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Justify youth
Yes,
cravings,
I can.
agitation through journalism.
Okay, now, youths crave many things. They crave to be innovators, they crave to be entrepreneurs, and we've seen that the Nigerian youth have so many varied interests. Now, a lot of people shy away from the business of journalism because the business of journalism is everything but glamorous. We all know that it doesn't pay as much as if you're in the corporate sector. We all know that if you start your business as an entrepreneur, you may make more money as a journalist. We all know that it is long hours. Today you're covering a protest. Tomorrow you're covering a long court case that can last 6-7 hours, and you're sweating it out as you're covering it. So basically, there is no way to say this. The youths are spoiled for choice. Those who have the cravings to be journalists will go into journalism. Do they need to be encouraged? Yes, to a certain extent, they need to be encouraged. But you may encourage them, but they can go into it and realize that it is not something that they need to do. So it means that the business of journalism, broadcasting, is maybe from those who employ journalists, maybe they must now learn to start doing something right to ensure that they make it more lucrative as you entice people to come into the profession, and then let them understand that you can build a lifelong career. But then let me also say this. The business of journalism is a thankless job. It's not a job that people go in to make money. But we do know that along the line, some people lose their way. and they see it as a conduit for making money. But I hope that those who are listening on this thread would understand that the business of journalism still remains a business of integrity. It still remains a business of knowing who your friends are, knowing who you speak to, and knowing where it is that you're seen. If, for example, you're reporting on, if you're probably reporting a case of advance fee fraud in court, you cannot, for any reason, be seen with somebody who is before the court, who you're reporting, because at some point, it is going to suggest that it is either you're compromised or you do not understand that you must give distance. And this is where people run into trouble. So a lot may crave wanting to become journalists, but then the thing is, you may go into it and realize the hours are too long, it's too dangerous, you're not enjoying it, it's too cutthroat for you, and at the end of the day, you want to veer off into doing something else. So it's a matter of choice. I veered off into journalism by accident, and the first day that I started journalism, and I was told that I would get to the office at 6:30 in the morning and I'm hard at it at 11 o'clock. No Saturday, no Sunday. It was a conscious effort I made that I was going to enjoy what it is I'm doing. And almost 27 years later, I don't regret it. So it's a personal choice for people. You may go into it and then you decide that it's not what you want to do. And you will go into it and decide that you will do it until the day you die.
We have another question from Noah Adiroju. Noah is asking, how can you still remain active in a situation where there is a division in thoughts and actions between the different ethnic groups in Nigeria, particularly between the North and the South? A typical example would be that of Mieti Allah's statement on the travails of Abba Kyari. Even looking at different media houses, one can easily discern where the leaning is. Did you get the question, ma'am?
Yes, I did. You see, those are some of the issues I talked about when I said self-censorship. You have gatekeepers who understand that the Nigeria project is not something to be toyed with. Now, it's like what is going on with everything in Nigeria. All of a sudden, you see yourself as, it's so bad. You see yourself as somebody from the middle belt before you say you're Hausa. You see yourself as being an Egba man before you say you're Urubu, before you say you're Ijebu. You see yourself as being an Urubu man before you say you're an Ishekiri person. That is how polarized we are in Nigeria. And this has been taken to the highest levels to a point where you start to see all of these groups, whether the North, the South, the East, or the West, going to bat for one of their own, especially when they feel that one of their own is in the line of fire. But as a journalist, two things I would always ask us to de-emphasize in the course of telling a story, if we have to tell it, is religion and ethnicity. Because these are the reasons, these are some of the strongest reasons why our country is on the boil. And when you know that the country is on the boil because of some, I beg to use the word, crass statements that come from interest groups or people who should know better, who just want to whip up ethnic, religious, and socio-economic, socio-political sentiments. At the end of when they're done grandstanding, you've done more damage and you've not addressed the issue. Abba Kyari is not wanted by the Nigerian government or the Nigerian police. It was as a result of an indictment issued by United States Court, an indictment by United States Court, which the Federal Bureau of Investigations communicated to Nigeria. What has the Nigerian government done, or what has the Nigerian police force done? They sent two statements. The first statement, we're studying this and we will commence internal reviews. The second statement, the Inspector General of Police, on advice of blah, 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 will suspend DCP Abba Kyari. And in that statement, it still talked about the fact that the Nigeria police force would accord him every respect and every dignity. Because remember, in law, whether Nigeria or anywhere else in the world, there is a presumption of innocence until proven guilty. Nobody has criminalized Abba Kyari. Nobody has accused him of a crime in Nigeria. Of course, you see all sorts of things on social media. And like, this is where, again, we talk about self-regulation. This is where we talk about, let us be responsible in our utterances. Because you say something, even if you express an opinion, somebody else has a right to respond. And in the course of responding to what it is you said, the person will take it over and above what it is you have said that resulted in the person's reaction. So again, it is to always preach the language of, let's adopt a responsible approach to our utterances. We can be polite, we can be civil. You may not agree with my submission, but it should not result into calling names. It shouldn't result into insults. It shouldn't result in denigrating people's characters or reputations or calling people names that they do not deserve. So in this situation, gatekeepers would have to decide, are they in the business of sensational journalism or keeping Nigerians focused in what the issue should be? For me, it's not an issue. Mieti Allah is free, like every organization in the world, to comment. But then it is up to the gatekeepers to realize where it is they want to go with the story. And if indeed there's a story in what has been sent.
Thank you very much. We have one last question here from Olu Muyiwa. Muyiwa is asking, would you say the youth are well and truly ready for leadership, given the dismal outing by youths who have had access to power at all levels of government, especially the local government level, which is the closest to the common man?
Okay, Olumuyiwa, thank you very much for that question. I think that must be my husband asking that question. Well, the youth had always been entrusted with power. If you go back to the First Republic, how old were they? How old were they when they were in power? But you see, with the 16-year military interregnum, what now happened? There wasn't an opportunity for growth. Now, Nigeria has become what it has become. Our values have been eroded in recent times. At the end of the day, some have actually put the blame on parents. Some have talked about the millennials. Some have talked about generation X, Y, and Z. Some have talked about our values being eroded. Some have talked about the fact that, the mindset of the youth today is not the same as the mindset of the youth who didn't have things easy. A lot of young people who were at school abroad were funded by government scholarships, were funded by exchange programs. So it meant that it was a hard life. It wasn't a life where they could afford to live it up. It wasn't a life where they could afford to party till the break of dawn. It wasn't a life where they could afford the luxuries that many people take for granted today. So you see, I think over the course of the decades that have gone by, values have been eroded. Parents have basically, some parents have shirked their responsibility. In the course of wanting to make money and introducing children to a life that was better than what they had, have not particularly paid attention to growth and development. Today, it's very difficult to hit a child and for people not to say to you, oh, buru. But in those days, I know that my mom would whack you if you did what was wrong. If parents were talking to people and you were sitting down as a child, by the time you're given the eye, you will know that you should get up from there. So you see, the values have changed. And if you've introduced money, you've introduced all sorts of things to children without borders, without boundaries, without letting them know, no, you cannot have more than 50 kobo a day. When I was growing up, the only time I saw money was in church, and that money was for your collection. But now we've introduced children to money. Children know money, and they talk about money in the tens of thousands and in the hundreds of thousands. But I do hope it's not in the millions, because if it's in the millions, then it means there is a problem. So you see, it's a systemic thing which we can actually correct if we understand that if we now start to focus on being parents to children and prepare children for leadership roles in the way we run our homes, then we can inch towards taking it back for them and imbuing them with responsibility and getting them to understand what service is about. That's what I think. It's a suggestion. I'm not ramming it down anybody's throat, but in the course of your work, you get to see these things and you get to hear it. You get to read about all sorts of things, and it makes you actually wonder. So yes, that's why you hear the older generation saying, are the youth ready for office? They're responsible youths who I believe are ready for office. We can identify them. You have youths in corporate Nigeria who are proving their mettle every day. 25, 30-year-olds, 35-year-old innovators who are CEOs, who are employers of labor. So I guess, yes, you can find, if you find the right ones, then we're good to go.
Thank you so much for that interesting presentation, Mrs. Dean Jacob. Mrs. Dean Jacob is Director of News at Television Continental TVC. Once again, thank you so much for sharing that knowledge and experience with us. Would like to invite Mr. Kayode Thomas, is one of our trainers, to make his contribution. Please, do we still have Mr. Kayode Thomas on board?
Yeah, he's here with us. He needs to unmute his mic. Yes. Oh, he's not the one. I think we've lost him. So go ahead, Femi.
Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's webinar. I want to especially thank our Executive Director, Mr. Simon Kolaole, and the Program Officer, Ms. Abiose. I don't know if she will be making a close remarks. Ms. Abiose. Okay, I think we've lost her. All right, ladies and gentlemen, guests and friends. Okay, Ms. Abiose, please.
Yeah,
one or two words.
I would just like to say a very big thank you to all of you for participating in this project. It has been a very challenging process, and we learned a lot. For us, it was a learning period. We learned a lot from it, and we are very delighted that the campus journalists brought and skills and expertise. And I also want to thank our colleagues, the campus journalists that came from other campus unions, such as the Obafemi Awolowo University, the Nigerian Institute of Journalism, the University of Ilorin, and all the other participating universities. We thank you so much. The HODs, the head of departments, and other leaders of campus unions. Thank you for participating. We've had a very interesting time out, and like the project is rounding up, but that doesn't really mean that it's the end of the relationship. We continue to support your work. If you have story ideas, keep sending it to us, and we work together to really bring about the desired change. I want to thank Mrs. Teladin. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Akoni, for your presentation as well. We are going to circulate it around. I don't know if my executive director wants to ask one or two things to say. Sir, you have one or two things to say to round up the project.
No, no, nothing more. I just want to say the name is Abiose, not Abiose. That's all I have to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all for joining the trainers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, guests and friends, once again, we thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. Like Ms. Abiose said, this is not the end of the thing. You know, it's going to be a continuous exercise. Thank you so much. We thank our speakers, Dr. Tunde Akoni from Lagos State University, Mrs. Stella Dean Jacob, Director of News TVC. Thank you all thanks to all our trainers.
We also want to especially thank Choke Kujenya. She was the program officer for during the period of the training, and she was fantastic. So, Joke Kujenya, I want to thank you so much for your hard work in mentoring the students.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.